What kind of person calls the cops over a garden gnome? Karen Hofstede. That's who. The woman was a walking caricature of suburban tyranny. Her voice a bullhorn that could shatter glass. Her figure a storm cloud in stretchy leopard print leggings. I'd only been in Willow Creek for 3 weeks when she decided my front yard was her personal battlefield. My crime. A single, slightly chipped ceramic gnome named Gerald, perched innocently by my mailbox. Apparently, it violated Section 3, Clause 7 of the HOA's Sacred Rulebook, no decorative lawn ornaments without board approval. I didn't even know we had a board. But there I was, unpacking my last box in my new home, when Karen's SUV screeched to a halt outside, her door slamming like a gunshot. She stormed up my driveway, her flip-flops slapping the pavement, waving a crumpled HOA violation notice like it was a royal decree. "You're in big trouble, Missy," she bellowed, her voice echoing across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked through blinds, drawn to the spectacle like moths to a porch light. I stood on my porch, still clutching a spatula from the kitchen, wondering how my quiet Sunday had turned into a circus. Before I could respond, she jabbed a finger at Gerald. "That thing's an eyesore. You've got 24 hours to remove it, or I'm calling the authorities." I laughed. I can't help it. The idea of cops hauling me away over a gnome was absurd. But Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a smirk that said she thrived on this kind of power. I didn't know it then, but I'd just stepped into the crosshairs of a woman who'd spent years bullying Willow Creek into submission. Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was its dictator. She'd ruled the neighborhood for a decade. Her word law, her whims gospel. Stories about her were whispered at mailboxes and over backyard fences, the time she fined Mrs. Larson $200 for planting unauthorized tulips, or how she'd had Mr. Gupta's car towed for parking an inch over his driveway line. People didn't fight Karen. They obeyed or moved away. I learned this the next morning when my doorbell rang at 7 a.m. Sharp. 2 men stood on my porch, dressed in what looked like Halloween store police uniforms, badges too shiny, pants too tight. One had a clipboard, the other, a pair of handcuffs dangling from his belt like a prop. "Ma'am, we're with the HOA enforcement unit," clipboard guy said, his voice shaky, like he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "You're under arrest for noncompliance with HOA regulations." I blinked, still in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand. Arrest? For a gnome? I glanced past them and saw Karen's SUV idling across the street, her silhouette unmistakable behind the tinted windows. This wasn't just about Gerald anymore. This was Karen flexing her empire, testing how far she could push a newcomer. I set my mug down, my pulse quickening, but not from fear. Anger was bubbling up, hot and sharp. I'd dealt with bullies before, but none this delusional. "You're not real cops," I said, crossing my arms. Clipboard guy flinched, but handcuff guy stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "We have authority to detain you, ma'am. Step outside." That's when I noticed the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Chun, filming the whole thing on her phone, her hands trembling. The cul-de-sac was waking up, eyes everywhere, and Karen was watching it all, her smirk probably growing by the second. I wasn't about to let this farce go any further. "Wait here," I told them, turning back into the house. My heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the thrill of what was coming. I'd kept my past quiet since moving to Willow Creek, wanting a fresh start, a break from the chaos of my old life. But Karen had just lit a match, and I was about to set the whole charade ablaze. In my bedroom. I opened the lockbox under my bed and pulled out the one thing I hadn't touched in months, my FBI badge. Special Agent Elena Marquez. The gold shield gleaming like a promise. I'd been on leave for 6 months, recovering from a case that left scars physical and otherwise, but the badge still carried weight. I slipped it into my pocket and walked back to the porch, where clipboard guy was reading from his script about HOA penalties, and handcuff guy was trying to look intimidating. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice calm but cutting through their chatter like a knife. I held up the badge, letting it catch the morning sun. "I'm Special Agent Elena Marquez, FBI. Care to explain why you're impersonating law enforcement?" The color drained from their faces. Clipboard guy dropped his pen, and handcuff guy's bravado melted into a stammer. "We're just HOA security," he mumbled, stepping back. Across the street, Karen's SUV door opened, and she stomped over, her face redder than a stop sign. "This is my neighborhood," she shouted, jabbing a finger at me. "You can't flash some fake badge and scare my officers." "Fake badge? Oh, Karen." She had no idea who she was dealing with. The standoff in my front yard was turning into a spectacle. Mrs. Chin was still filming, and now a few other neighbors had stepped outside, drawn by the commotion. Karen's voice grew louder, her accusations wilder. "You're a fraud. You're probably some con artist hiding out here." She spat, her hands on her hips, her presence filling the space like a storm. I stayed calm, letting her dig her own grave. "Karen," I said, stepping closer, my badge still in hand. "Impersonating a police officer is a felony. So is attempting to unlawfully detain someone. Your officers here are about 2 minutes from being in real handcuffs." The two men exchanged panicked glances, already backing toward their car. Karen's confidence faltered for a split second, but she doubled down, her voice shrill. "You think you can intimidate me? I've run this place for years. I know people." That's when the twist hit Mrs. Chun. Quiet, unassuming Mrs. Chun stepped forward, still holding her phone. "I've got it all recorded, Karen," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "And I sent it to my cousin. He's a lawyer with the DA's office." The air shifted. Karen's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For the first time, she looked small, her empire crumbling under the weight of a single phone. I seized the moment, turning to the fake cops. "You too. IDs. Now." They fumbled for their wallets, hands shaking, and I noted their names. They weren't cops, they were private security guards, hired by Karen to play dress up and intimidate. The crowd was growing, neighbors whispering, phones out, recording the downfall of Willow Creek's tyrant. Karen's reign was unraveling, and she knew it. Her face twisted with rage, but there was fear in her eyes now, a crack in her armor. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice hoarse, as if volume could salvage her authority. I stepped closer, my badge still in hand, my voice low but firm. "Karen, you've been bullying this neighborhood for years. You fined people into debt, harassed them over flowers and mailboxes, and now you're sending fake cops to their homes. This ends today." The fake officers were already retreating to their car, muttering apologies, their costumes looking more ridiculous by the second. Mrs. Chen's video was still rolling, and I could feel the weight of the neighbors' stares, their years of resentment bubbling to the surface. Karen turned to them, desperate. You're all going to let her talk to me like this. I keep this place perfect. But no one spoke up. Not one. Instead, Mr. Gupta, the man whose car she'd towed, stepped forward. You fined me for my daughter's bike because it was too pink. You made my wife cry. Mrs. Larson joined him, her voice quiet but sharp. My tulips were my mother's favorite. You called them trash. One by one, the neighbors spoke, their voices rising like a chorus. Each story a brick in the wall of Karen's tyranny. She stood frozen, her empire collapsing under the weight of their truth. I could have called for backup right then, had Karen and her fake cops hauled off for questioning. But this wasn't about might, was about Willow Creek taking back its soul. I turned to the crowd. You don't need her permission to plant flowers or park your car. You don't need her to live your lives. I looked at Karen, who was clutching her violation notepad like a lifeline. You're done intimidating people. Step down, or I'll make sure the DA's office gets that video. Her hands shook, the notepad falling to the ground, pages scattering in the breeze. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. For the first time, Karen Hofstede was speechless. She turned and stumbled back to her SUV, the doors slamming as she sped off, leaving her fake cops to slink away in their own car. The cul-de-sac was silent for a moment, the tension breaking like a storm passing. Then Mrs. Chun lowered her phone, tears in her eyes, and hugged me. Thank you, she whispered. The neighbors erupted in chatter, some laughing, some crying, all free for the first time in years. In the days that followed, Willow Creek changed. Karen resigned from the HOA that same week. Her house listed for sale by the month's end. The board was restructured, with Mrs. Chun and Mr. Gupta taking the lead, promising fairness and transparency. My gnome, Gerald, stayed by the mailbox, joined by a few others as neighbors embraced their freedom to decorate. I didn't flash my badge again, didn't need to. The neighborhood knew who I was now. Not just an agent, but a neighbor who'd stood up when it mattered. I'd come to Willow Creek for peace, to escape the weight of my past. But I'd found something better, a community that fought back. Sometimes, all it takes is one spark, one badge, one video, one voicito remind people they're stronger than their bullies. And as I sat on my porch that evening, watching kids ride bikes and neighbors plant flowers without fear, I knew I'd found my place. Not as an agent, but as one of them. End/Xi Artifact.